right after high school, my first job, I worked in a mechanical garage. I worked there for 9 years. I became a taxi driver. I was the first Gambian journalist to interview Akon. I had no formal higher education. I didn't know how to read and write and all of that, but I stopped at grade 12. So I was straight from the hood to the TV. King Charles came to Gambia, and I was the reporter attached to King Charles. And one day, the environment minister had to go on trek, and the reporter that was supposed to go with him, I think, phoned in sick. So my editor came to me and he said, Rahim, can you please go with the environment minister? The minister told me that, how about you report on climate change? What is climate change? The minister's permanent secretary called me and was like, Rahim, we want to go with you to COP24. He said, we're going to Poland. Here's the trick. We can only take you. So what I did was I bought myself a camera, I bought myself a laptop, and taught myself how to film, how to report, and how to edit. From COP24, I went to COP25 in Spain, in Madrid. COP26, we came to Glasgow, went to COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Egypt. I worked for 6 years at GRTS and never took a holiday. I wrote so many cover letters that I mastered the art of writing a cover letter. I can easily say I think I wrote maybe even more than 500 applications. So I couldn't get any job. Black Professional Scotland, I remember I joined on the website and I saw what they did. I applied for it and I got the internship at BBC Sports. I applied for another internship at the newsroom and I got that one. And I was jobless again. And I got a call from STV and they said, hi Rahim, we've shortlisted you for the 2 roles that you've applied for. But unfortunately, we found 2 other people that were better for this role. I don't know if I'm the first black reporter in STV, I don't think so. But I'm definitely the first Gambian journalist to work with STV News. And I'm so proud of that achievement. My name is Rahim Cham, and I'm a journalist at STV News. I started off my career in the Gambia. I started off right after high school. My first job, I worked in a mechanical garage at a spare parts shop. So I used to sell spare parts. I worked for my brother for about 9 years. And my salary, I remember, was equivalent to £30 a month. I sat down, had to reflect on my life. What am I doing? Is this the right path? You know, is this what I want to be? Do I want to work in a mechanical garage my whole life? Is this the path that I really want to do? Am I really fulfilling my purpose in life? So it's when I said, you know what, I think I want to start off on my own, you know, stop working for my elder brother and, you know, go on a journey on my own, look at the world eye to eye, see what the world has to offer and face it like a man. My elder brother compensated me with a taxi and I became a taxi driver. So I used to use the car to go and do taxi work and stuff like that. So one day, one of my best friends introduced me to his uncle who used to work at the upper echelons of the Gambia government. By then, I remember we were just, you know, within the last year of the dictatorship in the Gambia. So this uncle of my best friend, you know, used to organize these motivational nights where we come and, you know, to talk about our careers, what we're going through, where we want to project ourselves and stuff like that. And I told him, I remember this, I told my best friend, I told him, I don't belong there because everyone else that goes there has a bachelor's degree, has a master's degree, has all of these degrees, and I'm coming from the informal sector. I'm a taxi driver. What can I say? The uncle really liked me. He really, really liked the way I articulated myself. He really liked the way, my understanding of the Gambian music scene. So 2 years or a year, I would say, down the line, he got reinstated in his job, and this time he got given the job as the Director General of the Gambia Radio and Television Services. So there's where things really changed 360. So I remember about 6 months into that, he told me that I think you know quite a good, you have a good understanding about Gambian music. I think you should come and, you know, do some entertainment work with us at GRTS. So back then, everyone hated GRTS because it was a state broadcaster. And it was like the propaganda machine for the dictator. So nobody wanted to be part of that. You know, so it was for over 6 months. It was hard for me to take that bold to decide and say, okay, let me go and be a reporter, an entertainment journalist or entertainment presenter at the state TV. 6, 7 months down the line, I said, okay, you know what, fine, cool. I will take the offer. It wasn't even a job. It was a 3-month contract, I remember. And I started off as an entertainment presenter. So I used to present these entertainment shows and I used to do it in English. most of our entertainment presenters back then in GRTS were presenting, but in the local language. It just made more sense for them to present in the local language because of the type of music, the type of culture that they were actually showcasing. But for what I was doing, I preferred to do it in English. And because I dealt with rappers, I dealt with different kind of artists. By this time, it wasn't just about rappers. Now I had to broaden my horizon and bring in Afro-Manding artists, rap mbala artists, you know, different artists singing from doing different kind of genres, different type of culture. So I had to bring them all together and make sure I created a show that would highlight Gambian music. I started having people who dealt within the fashion industry. I had at some point when international artists came to Gambia, I was lucky that some of them even came to this talk show. I remember I interviewed Akon at the airport in the Gambia. When he landed, I was the first Gambian journalist to interview Akon in the Gambia. I had that interview with him. But down the line, I shifted to not just being an entertainment presenter. I said, you know what, let me do entertainment reports as well. Make sure I do a 3-clip report with a voiceover and everything, highlighting about this event or this artist or whatever, whatnot, and put it on the news. Now, back then, this entertainment show was just, let's say, every Saturday or at 5 p.m. But now I wanted the entertainment reports to come on the prime time news at 8. So this was a bigger step. This was a step forward. So I started doing entertainment reports. So that's how my entertainment reports got on TV. You know, the artists, it gave them a bigger platform. Even though it was a short minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but it was a bigger platform because the whole Gambia was watching. GRTS was the only TV in the Gambia back then, and it's the state TV. So that's how I understand. That's how I got to understand how to write reports, how to cut, how to edit. You know, that's how I got to understand how to do these things and how to tell a story visually, not just sitting and asking and just asking questions one-on-one. It taught me how to sit and cut images visually. You know, this is how I want my storyline to actually go. So that's how I got into broadcast journalism. So the newsroom back then in the Gambia, in GRTS, they sensed that, okay, this guy kind of has the feel of how to write reports. He can do entertainment reports. How about we pull him to current affairs? So bit by bit, I started going on the daily routines of, you know, this is happening here, this is happening there. Mind you, I had no formal higher education. I didn't know how to read and write and all of that, but I stopped at grade 12. You know, unlike most of my peers or most of my colleagues who had degrees, a bachelor's degree, or who had, you know, a master's degree, I didn't have none of those degrees. I was straight from the hood to the TV. So I got to understand all of these things, how they work on the job. I didn't go to no formal education for this. And whilst I was doing this, I did my reports. It was coming on TV. I had built more trust with my editors. So most of my reports were now going on TV. And one day, this was also another turning point in my life in which the environment minister had to go on trek. So what happens is the environment minister has projects that's happening all over up country. And the reporter that was supposed to go with him, I think phoned in sick. So my editor came to me and he said, Rahim, can you please go with the environment minister up country and, you know, just be with him for about 5 days and send in your reports and we'll put them on TV. So I went with the environment minister up country, and every day what I did was, after the end of the day, I opened the laptop and play him the news package, the news report that was supposed to be aired that night or the day after, and played it for him. So he used to watch my news reports every day, even before it was aired. At the end of the trek, he called me one day. He said, Rahim, most of our journalists are focusing on the political landscape. The minister told me that, how about you report on climate change? I was like, what is climate change? Bit by bit, he schooled me on what climate change was, how people are affected by climate change. So that's how I got into environmental journalism and started, you know, reporting about environmental, you know, the effects of climate change. I started going up country, you know, and getting to understand how climate change works, how it affects us as a nation, how it affects the global south itself. So I remember one day, the King of England, the current King of England, King Charles, came to Gambia and was on a 3-day visit. and I was the reporter attached to King Charles. So mind you, you can't interview King Charles or anything, but I was the reporter attached to him and had to, file in the reports on his day-to-day activities. So when we were on the convoy with King Charles, I remember the minister's permanent secretary called me and was like, Rahim, we want to go with you to COP24. And I was like, what is COP24? I didn't know what COP24 was. He said, just Google it, you'll get to know what COP24 was. I said, where exactly are we going? He said, we're going to Poland. For a split second, I didn't know where Poland was. I was like, okay, Poland. Poland is in Europe. Oh my God, I'm going to Europe. So he said, but here's the trick. We can only take you. We can't take a reporter, we can't take an editor or a cameraman. You're the only person that we can take. I was like, okay, that's tricky. So what I did was I bought myself a camcorder, a DSLR camera. I bought myself a laptop and taught myself how to film, how to report, and how to edit. So I had to learn how to do these three things all on my own, all in one day. You film your content on the day, write your script on the day, do the voiceover on the day, cut the clips, edit it on the day, and send it back home and make sure it was broadcasted on national television. So I had to teach myself this quickly, really, really, really quickly. I can remember I did 7 news reports that were broadcasted. And what was even more rewarding was that whilst we were in Poland, during our engagements, the environment minister was being phoned back from back home in Gambia, and his colleagues were being phoned and they say, oh, we're seeing you guys in Poland, we're seeing your reports, we're seeing you meeting with this guy, meeting with that guy. So they were getting feedback, like direct feedback from people back home in Gambia about what was actually going on in Poland. So they loved it, and when we came back, we had to write our reports to the funders, which was the UNDP. And I remember one of the officials of the UNDP told me, he said, Rahim, we have been funding this trip, this COP trip for a while, and this is the first time ever we have received 8 video reports that were broadcasted on national television. You're the first reporter that have done this. And I've done this single-handedly. I've done this on my own and as a first-time correspondent, international correspondent with the Ministry of Environment for GRTS, the Gambia Radio and Television Services. So that was an amazing big win. And after COP24, the UNDP told the Ministry of Environment that, okay, from now on, every COP we want Rahim to go. So that's how I went from COP24, I went to COP25 in Spain, in Madrid. I went there, and in the next year, we went to COP26 in Glasgow, and another turning point happened. So going to these COPs really changed my life, because there's where I went from just being an entertainment presenter, wearing a cap, baseball cap and all of that, to wearing suits and ties. And I've been promoted and started anchoring the news. I became one of the national news anchors for the Gambia Radio and Television Services. So COP26, we came to Glasgow, did an amazing job with the Gambian delegation here in Glasgow. And I worked for 6 years at GRTS and never took a holiday. And so I said, you know what, since I have 6 months of compounded leave and all my siblings live in the UK, let me just take a long holiday and visit the UK. I really liked England, visiting my cousins and my brothers and stuff like that. But Edinburgh stuck in my mind. It was just a different city for me. I just didn't see anything like it. And I had 2 months of my holiday left. I said, you know what, let me go back. Let me go back to Edinburgh and spend those last 2 months of my holiday before I head back home to Gambia. And within that 2 months, I met one of the most amazing women in my life, who eventually became my wife, and went to COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, which was, I would say, my best, but my final COP, that I went to. So after that COP, I came back. I remember coming back from COP27 a week later. It was the Gambia Press Union Awards, and I was nominated for Environmental Journalist of the Year, and I won. I won Environmental Journalist of the Year. I got married with my wife, and I think a month later, packed my stuff and moved to Edinburgh. We made it to the UK, and back in Edinburgh, now reality kicked in. I wrote so many cover letters that I mastered the art of writing a cover letter, you know, but it didn't get me anywhere. I wrote so many applications, applied for everything I could see with regards to media, but I realized that my CV, even though I had a very rich CV, my CV was mainly about Gambian stuff. You know, it was mainly about the Gambia, this is what I did here, this is what I did here, nothing related to the UK. So that made it very difficult for me to, you know, pivot myself on a UK market. I can easily say I think I would maybe even more than 500 applications. So I couldn't get any job. Black Professionals Scotland, I remember I joined on the website and I saw what they did. And luckily there was a sports internship at BBC Scotland. I'm not a sports journalist. I know nothing about sports journalism. Never did a sports report in my life, but I applied for it and I got the internship at BBC Sports. And that was my first journalism role in Scotland. So I did my 3 months internship with BBC Scotland and it was absolutely amazing. And right before my internship finished with the sports team, because it was a 3-month internship, I applied for another internship at the newsroom and I got that one as well. So I got that one and I worked with the digital news team, which was the online team in the newsroom. So basically this was something I also haven't done before, which is writing news. But unfortunately, my internship also came to an end. So it was 3 months, another 3 months, it actually came to an end and I was jobless again. So what happened was one of my bosses at BBC really liked me and really looked out for me. His name's Pete. So Pete, from time to time, gave me some freelance roles. And I also did the election here, which happened in 2024, I think, which was last year, 2024. And I worked with Kirsty Walk, who is one of the main presenters of Newsnight. She is like the Scottish queen of broadcasting. I got to work with her. I worked as her researcher. That was, I'll say, one of the biggest highlights of my career here in Scotland as a journalist. But after that, things got quiet again and I became jobless for a while. And just one fine day, clicking on LinkedIn, applying jobs bit by bit. You know, on LinkedIn, you can just press apply and then your profile gets sent. And I was just pressing apply, just pressing apply. Anything I saw, news, media, pressing apply. And I applied for this content producer and production journalist role at STV News. So I pressed apply. One day, just sitting there in the living room, applying for normal jobs as well. And I got a call from STV and they said, "Hi, Rahim, we've shortlisted you for the 2 roles that you've applied for, which was content producer and for production journalist. So we want to interview you for those 2 roles." I was like, what? Another turning point. I got that phone call to come for that job interview at STV, and I remember I prepped for it really, really well. This was the job that was my real talent, like being on television, being on screen. This was my real talent. And I said, I'm gonna give this interview all I got. I prepped for that interview with my wife like really, really hard. I prepped for it, gave it all I got. And when I came to the interview, the questions were coming in. I gave them my best shot. I gave them I walked out that interview and I was like, I will get this job. I know that I will get this job because I was so confident on that interview. I don't know where that came from. It's like God just blew something into me that said, Rahim, you have nothing to lose, give it all you got. And that's exactly what I did. I was giving them so much answers. Like I can remember when they ask you a question and you give them the answers and they write it on the sheet, they write on the sheet and stuff like that. The sheet was full, like within 15 to 20 minutes of the interview, the sheet was full. And I was interviewed by the editor-in-chief, I was interviewed by their top producer. You know, they interviewed me and it was a really, really good interview. And I walked out that interview and I was like, I got this job. I believe I will get this job. And even if I don't get this job, I believe that I've come very close to getting this job. So went back home. I was expecting to hear the call in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks later, I received the call from the HR and I saw the call and I said, yes, this looks like I got the job. And the lady was like, hi, really, and he said, unfortunately, they said, we shortlisted you for both of those roles, the content producer and the production journalist. But unfortunately, we found two other people that were better for this role. But I was like, okay, we have another role that we want to give you. I said, well, it's like a multimedia journalist. I told him, what do you mean? Well, what do you mean by a multimedia journalist? He said, it's a journalist. He said, basically, you're a reporter. You'll be the ones out in the streets, reporting, writing, filming, and being on television. And that was exactly what I was doing in Gambia. And this has worked for me because back home in Gambia, I never been to university. They don't have a master's degree and all of that. So my only thing that I had to do to be a step ahead of my peers was I will know how to film, know how to edit, and know how to tell a story on my own, be a one-man army. And I perfected that back home in Gambia, and it paid off today. That's why when they said, we want to give you this role as a multimedia journalist, I already knew, I already had that skill set. We called it something different back home, but here, I already had that skill set for that role of knowing how to film, knowing how to edit, knowing how to report, all on my own. And they said, we want to give you that job, which was even a higher pay for the job I initially applied for. So that's how I got into STV as a multimedia journalist. And the rest is history. I've done so many reports with STV. Basically every day we're out there, we're filming, we're editing, we're doing stuff. I also don't position myself as just a black reporter or a reporter that only reports on black stuff. I report on everything. STV puts me out there to report on certain very important national issues that I feel like, yo, I think this has to do with the national heritage of Scotland. They give me these stories to actually do and position me there and make sure that I do these stories and, get to tell Scotland's stories, I don't know, but with a different face, in a different lens, in a different, perspective. So, and it works. It's absolutely fulfilling to be able to actually do these stories. I don't know if I'm the first black reporter in STV. I don't think so. But I'm definitely the first Gambian journalist to work with STV News. And I'm so proud of that achievement. So being able to position yourself as a journalist in Scotland as a black person can be one of the most challenging things to do, because what should you position yourself in? For example, me coming from the Gambia, I didn't know, should I be a Gambian journalist reporting on climate change issues, that's linking it to Scotland? There's not enough stories like that. Should I be a Gambian journalist reporting on black culture? Is that the only thing I'm good at? And I'm not necessarily someone who knows black culture that much. And UK's black culture is different from Gambia's black culture. So there were so many different dynamics that I had to create my own type of job. I had to create my own narrative, So that's why one of the first things I had to do was make my show reel. What I did was I just was true to myself and put in my CV who I was, what I actually did. And your best shot, or what changes things, is when you get to that job interview, what you tell them, who you are. I think sometimes they don't necessarily even want to see, they don't really care what's in your CV, especially for media. It's about how well you articulate yourself, how well you tell your stories, your ideas. So sometimes it's the way you position yourself in an interview. You speak from the heart, you tell them your story, you tell them the stories that you can tell, and that will make a huge difference, I believe.